I'm Carol Feeley. I am the creative director at Innocent Drinks. So it's a European role. I've been at Innocent for about a year and a half. And prior to that, I'd been agency based. So I'd been at an agency in the northeast of England for about, actually just over 10 years. And I'd worked my way up there from, starting as a junior designer and then progressing to senior and then working my way up to creative director. Okay. So working there with that agency with lots of global clients, which is brilliant, Disney, Nickelodeon, MTV. So I think that's where I got most of my experience. Mm-hmm. And then left there and then, set off to the world of Innocent.
Okay. So as creative director of EU, does that mean that you look after all of the creative that goes out for Europe?
Yes. Yeah.
So are there multiple departments throughout Europe, or does it come from like a central location?
So we're based in the UK as a team, and we've actually just had a restructure. So now we've got heads of kind of France and the DACH region as well, which sit within our team. Mm-hmm. And then I manage a group of amazing designers and some fantastic copywriters as well. So we're a team of about, I keep on losing track because we kind of have so many now. I think it's about 24. And it's me and the head of creative who lead the team.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's a cheesy thing to say, but God, what a team. They're like proper brilliant, as you'd expect from Innocent.
I know. I've heard good things. So what does a creative director do at Innocent?
I spend most of my day in back-to-back meetings. But I think, I am in a lot of meetings. I spend a lot of time feeding back on work. So I might not necessarily be doing any of the creative work myself, but my role is to support the designers and copywriters to make sure that they've got the right environment basically to create the best work possible. We have lots of brainstorms, particularly at the moment with COVID. There's always new ideas popping up or new ways to connect with drinkers. So we spend a lot of time with last minute calls, like, has anyone got an hour to spare to think of some ideas for this? And I love that. I think that's like such a unique thing about the company is that everyone's always kind of really engaged and really up to do that. And then a lot of it as well is working with the studio manager. So, planning what project we've got coming up, what's in the pipeline, and that can kind of be up to 2 years in advance. So making sure we've got the right resource within the team, making sure everyone's got kind of the right skills to do the job they need. And then, a lot of problem solving as well. So dealing with whatever else comes my way.
Okay, so what was your background? What got you into design? Where did you start?
I'm one of those people who was only ever good at one thing at school. So I like design. I love graphic design from kind of GCSE level. And I was like, there was never another option for me. I was just like, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to be a creative director. I was like, that is it. I just knew it. But didn't quite understand, I think at the time, what it meant, all the challenges that would come along the way. Ended up doing kind of foundation degree at college and then taking that onto uni where I did graphic design with a specialised in illustration for a year. Always just stuck with graphic design jobs. I mean, I certainly didn't land in a design job straight away. I had to work in an art shop in Newcastle for about 6 months, chatting to whoever came through the door who looked like they might be a designer. I'm like, right, let's find out what they do. Eventually landed myself a job.
Yeah, okay. Like around that age, like when you love the creative element and you like exploring and you love design, to be able to like project yourself forward and know exactly what a creative director does and what that actually looks like, I think it's quite a tricky thing. Are there parallels between what you thought it would be and what it is?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it's what I thought, but I must admit a lot of it's much harder. And I think you think creative director and you think, oh, it's going to be, creatively directing all the time. And it's not, it's managing. And I love doing that. It's one of the favorite parts of my role. Yeah. But leading a team can be really, really tricky, particularly when everyone's working from home in a global pandemic. But even when we're all in the office as well, keeping people motivated, engaged, that's all part of being a creative director. And I think when I was much younger, I was really naive to that. I was like, oh, you just get to go and, I don't know, work on something for Nike and it'll be really cool and you'll win an award. And actually, I don't care about winning awards. It's just not, I'm just not interested in that at all. Yeah. It's much more exciting for me when my dad sends me a message and says, I really like the new packaging or something. And I'm like, oh, cool. I can tell the designer who worked on that, my dad likes it. That's cool.
Yeah. Okay. What was the like transition point for you as a practitioner moving into a management role? So you becoming someone that's not just doing the work, but you're creating the space that enables that work to happen. Like, what was that like, that part of your career?
So going from like designer to switch into that role, do you mean? I think the last agency I was in, I'd been a designer for quite a few years and I was getting a bit bored, to be honest. And I was able to tell the boss there, like, look, I'm getting a bit bored. I was thinking about leaving. And that was probably one of the best things I could have done, was just be honest about it, because it made me build my own role. Basically, I wanted to be more involved with the clients. I wanted more of a say in the work that we were doing. So it meant that there was a bit of an awkward point where, you're completely overwhelmed with work because you're still sort of doing a design job, but you're also trying to kind of go out there, meet new clients, bring new clients in. I really like that. I like talking to people. Yeah. So it was quite a tricky balance, and I'm probably a great example of someone who didn't do it very well, because I was just working like all hours of the day trying to do a bit of everything, and I found it really hard to let go of the creative kind of doing it side of things. Yeah. And I think it took me a long time to trust the team to kind of get on and do the work. Not like nothing against them at all, a brilliant team, but I think it was just the pressure of, when you're the one dealing with the clients, you do feel that extra level of pressure of, everything has to be perfect. Everything's got to be spot on. Yeah. But I think that was what was great about, when I did come to change roles and went to Innocent, my role there was very strict in that I've got essentially 30% of my time is creative. I remember reading that in the job spec and being like, actually, that's great to have it where it's literally like 30% of your time and you're in control of that. So you've got the power. If someone says, can you help me out with this? Or, this needs retouching or whatever it might be. It's like, actually, no, guys, I don't do that. So it's very, very defined role, which is brilliant.
Yeah. It's very hard to let go, but I think once you do, it's quite empowering, isn't it? Because you can just continue
on. Definitely. But at times as well where I really miss it. So, but I'll find myself doing kind of more personal projects, or I don't know, a bit of type for Instagram or whatever, just something to kind of keep my brain working. I'm worried that I'll kind of forget how to be a designer.
Yeah. Do you think you took to management as a natural? Did it come easy to you?
I think so. God, I've made some mistakes. But I think one of the most important things I've learned is that, you can't know it all, and you shouldn't. And there's definitely been times where I've been very hard on myself for things that I've done wrong or I could have handled better. Mm-hmm. But I think everyone does that. And I think, I've learned so much from the stuff that I've done wrong, and I sure as hell won't do it again. But I think, I do really enjoy it, and that's what makes a difference. It helps when you've got a great team and very nice people, very intelligent and talented people to manage. It makes it a lot easier. But that also makes it very difficult because they are so fantastic. It's, making sure that they've got enough motivation and they've got enough drive and, really focusing on their development. So that's a challenge as well, but I absolutely love that.
Yeah. I think we spoke a little bit about imposter syndrome in our email. And when I was reflecting on like, what has my experience been with having imposter syndrome, I kind of went on a trail of thought where I similar to what you've just described, is as soon as I felt that I'd become comfortable with not needing to know everything, that for me is when imposter syndrome didn't really become a thing, because I understand that it's actually your strengths and weaknesses that set you apart, and like leveraging those differences is really what creates a team. And I think that's a bit of an epiphany as a leader, right? You start to then appreciate the mix of skills within the team.
Definitely, yeah. And I think having that vulnerability as well, and to be able to have a team that you trust, where you can say, do you know what, I'm not actually sure what I'm doing here, and I could actually use some support. Because most of the time people are like, yeah, I'll give you a hand with that. And, that's happened to me as well. And I think all of the managers or senior people I've dealt with who've been like that and who have been vulnerable, I massively respect them for it, because it's quite a brave thing to do.
Yeah, 100%. Right. We are all problem solvers, and at the very core of problem solving is admitting that you don't know the answer, right? Like, how are you going to solve a problem?
Definitely.
Okay. So I'm interested to hear about the Women's Affinity group that you run at your workplace. Would you be able to tell me a bit about that?
So that was actually born out of Imposter Syndrome. So we did some stuff last year, actually year before last, for International Women's Day at Innocent. And there was a group of probably about 15 women who decided to get together and put on a few events for work. And back in November, we had an email from a woman in the company to say, we want to set up this group, but we need someone to lead it. Who would like to lead it? And I read the email and I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to join that group, but I can't lead it. I don't know how to lead a group like that. I've never done anything like that in my life. So didn't think much more about it, and actually went to a ladies wine and design event, which I'm sure we'll get onto later, which was all about imposter syndrome. And there's a really great book. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, of course.
The book's got a swear word in it. It's called Fuck Being Humble by Stephanie Sword-Williams. And it's all about imposter syndrome. And she did a talk for an hour. And one of the things she said, which I can never kind of put as brilliantly as she did, but it's basically, with imposter syndrome, it's such a self-centered feeling. It's all about me. It's what are people going to think of me? Yeah. And actually, if you can spin it on its head, and I'll use kind of the Women's Affinity group as an example. So if I step up and do that, what example does that set to other people in the team who might be kind of midweight or junior level? They might actually look at this and go, do you know what? Carol did that, so maybe I can do something like that in the future. And I was like, right, if I can think like that, I reckon I can get my head around it. So I sent an email that night to say, yeah, I'll lead it. And, if there's other people want to do it, like, absolutely fine, And I got an email back to say, like, yeah, you've got it. I was like, oh God, what have I done? But it was it started off really small. There's only a few of us in the group, which was lovely, actually, because it kind of eased me in. And I was totally upfront with them. I was like, look, guys, I've signed up for this. I think it's really important we do it. But I don't really have a clue how to lead something like this. So I'm going to need a lot of help. And they were like, yeah, sure. So we meet up probably kind of once a month. We'll have a theme. And it could be anything from discussing ideas for International Women's Day and what we want to do as a company for that. It could be, topics are really, really broad. Some of it's kind of like how you manage your cycle at work, and how is the best way to kind of leverage your cycle. And then topics kind of go from there. A lot of stuff about female leadership, loads on imposter syndrome. Because I think that's something that you can never really solve. It's just you manage it and, just being aware of it. But it's such a great group of women, and like really like open and honest chats, and so helpful to hear what other experiences women have gone through and how they've dealt with things. And actually, once you start sharing, you're kind of like, oh yeah, that happened to me, or that's why I didn't say something when that happened. Like, I get why that felt a bit jarring, and actually why it made me feel uncomfortable. So it's great, just like a safe space really for those chats, which is brilliant.
Yeah, it sounds good. Why do you think imposter syndrome is such a prominent topic?
Someone actually said to me a couple of months ago, how helpful is it to have a label? Because I was talking about myself with imposter syndrome, and I was like, actually, I don't know if it's very helpful at all. I think, particularly with women, I think there's a real problem with kind of, being humble and not shouting about our accomplishments. And I think from a really, early age, as kids, you're told it's praised to be kind of a bit more shy and a bit more reserved. And if you brag, it's really frowned upon. And I think, as you get taught that when you're younger, that you kind of take that with you. And I think there's loads of stuff around it about, and for me, I think imposter syndrome actually gets worse the further I progress in my career. And I really thought it would have gotten a lot better. And it's something I chat to my sister about a lot. She's got her own business, and I'll send her messages and I'll be like, oh my God, imposter syndrome alert, this thing happened today, and oh my God, what the hell was I thinking? And she's like, it's really not that big a deal, it's absolutely fine, like, don't worry about it. but yeah, I think it's something that everyone faces, you know, men and women. But I do think it's more of a female problem, and there's a lot of language used around the workplace, particularly when you look at job adverts. You know, if there's a title of leadership in there, you get less women applying because it's just in your brain. You know, you're not going to be a female leader. That's still, you know, it's just the numbers of that, particularly in the creative industry. It's just so small. It's like 3% of women are creative directors. It's insane. But yeah, I think as long as we're all talking about it, and what you said before as well, you know, that, you know, it makes me think, it's like, right, great, you've got it too. You know, everyone's got a bit of imposter syndrome to some level.
Yeah. I think that's why it's great that you guys have got a safe space, because quite often when you say things out loud and you recognize that other people are experiencing it, it's not weird anymore. It's not taboo. It's something that you know, everybody's got and they've got to manage, and it does make things a little bit easier.
Yeah. I was just going to say as well, I think with the group as well, we've got such a range of different women at different levels in the company, and particularly when you see more senior women and hearing them talk about imposter syndrome, and, you know, them saying, oh my God, you know, I was absolutely bricking it, and this is the way I've coped. These are the strategies I used to try and cope with it. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, really? Because she looks like she would never be kind of fazed by anything. And I just think that's so inspiring. And if everyone actually just had a chat about it, everyone would be a lot kind of more cool about it. It'd be like, oh, do you know what? It's just how we feel. It's fine.
I think so. Yeah. When you don't talk about it in your head, you've got the pressure to just constantly be performing, and your self-talk is usually on the negative side, right? And critical. What are some of the techniques that you have for managing imposter syndrome?
Number one, talking, usually to my sister. So she's very level-headed, and she'll talk to me really straight and say, you're making a big deal out of this, or actually, do you know what, this is a big deal, but this is how you're going to cope with it. Someone recently told me that if you've got a presentation and you absolutely like bricking it before your presentation, if you're sat down, particularly this works really well on a call, just tapping your foot. She said that works wonders for her, just to have something for your brain to be thinking about. Which I haven't actually tried yet, but I might give that a go next time I'm feel the imposter syndrome. And I think, I read a lot, and I think that book I mentioned earlier, that's brilliant for having some strategies in there. But I think thinking of that bigger picture as well of, what is it? I mean, it could be something tiny. It could be, maybe you've just got a presentation at work and you're thinking, oh my God, someone else would do a much better job of this. Or maybe you're presenting something you've designed yourself and you're like, oh, I don't even know if it's very good. Chances are it's going to be fine. But also, what's the worst that could happen? Like, I try and apply that to pretty much every part of my life. It's like, honestly, what is the worst that can happen? Most of the time, it's not going to be that bad. And actually, what if it goes really well? What happens if the client loves it? What happens if you completely ace your presentation? Like, and it is that negative self-talk, it's, if you can flip that on its head and just even ask yourself one of those questions. I sometimes have questions like that stuck around me, like Post-it notes, just to remind me, like, do not do that to yourself. Like, don't worry about that presentation or whatever it might be. What if it goes well?
Yeah, so often the pros outweigh the cons, but in your head, you're more worried about saying the wrong thing and looking silly. Whereas that actually doesn't mean anything if you don't give it power. But then having done it is empowering, because you can keep doing more of it.
Definitely.
So you said, like, as you progress through your career and you get more and more senior and you take on more and more responsibility, the imposter syndrome remains. Does it remain with the same kind of things, or does it grow with you?
That's a really good question. I think it probably grows with you, because as a designer, I'm a lot more confident now than I used to be. When I was junior or midweight, I'd be worried that if my work was good enough. I don't worry about that anymore now. Like, maybe because I do less work, but I know that I'm capable of being a great creative director. I wouldn't have got the job Innocent if I wasn't. They've got a pretty rigorous interview process, which I managed to get through, so trust them on that. But yeah, I think it does develop with you. I think as you progress, you end up in situations with kind of stakeholders or more senior people, and that can be really daunting sometimes. And if it's an occasion where I'm talking about something to do with design, absolutely fine, because I know that. But if it's a topic that I'm maybe not so sure on,
Yeah.
or if I haven't had time to prepare, I'm such a prepper. Like, I like to have my notes ready. I like to have, read everything in advance. And I think if I'm caught off guard, that's when, I can feel like that feeling of like, oh God, this feels awful, this feels uncomfortable. But also, if I'm in a situation like that, I'll just say, do you know what, I haven't had a chance to, whatever it is, I haven't had a chance to read the email, or, I actually don't know much about this. Like, can you tell me a bit more about it? And I think just having the confidence to do that, and, just say, you need to kind of let me know what's going on here. Because a lot of people don't. A lot of people just sit in silence and think, shit, like, I don't know what I'm doing. But just literally just say, most of the time it's fine.
Yeah, I personally, I find it like in the past, if I'm not understanding something, I may have just sat there thinking, I don't understand this. Everybody else is on the same page. I'm not. Am I just slow? Am I missing something? But now I do lean towards, if I've been listening, if I'm not understanding, maybe they haven't explained it right. Maybe I'll ask them, and then other people will also get. And it's a beautiful moment when you ask the question, feeling a little bit silly, and then somebody else goes, I was going to ask that question.
Definitely. And guaranteed there's always at least one person who's sat there as well being like, I don't get what's going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
I heard somewhere, like touching on that, you said that many women won't apply for leadership roles just because it has leadership in the title. I heard somewhere someone say that if you're looking at the like roles and responsibilities on a job description, typically a man will apply if they tick like maybe half, 50 to 80% of the boxes.
6 out of 10. Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But women want to make sure that they have all of the criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 6 out of 10 for men, and it's either 9 or 10 out of 10 for women. Wow. Which is, I just think that's so interesting, and it's such an insight into confidence between men and women. But yeah, such a fascinating one. And now it's the same, isn't it? I read through that job spec like a million times, and there was bits on that where I'm like, oh, I'm not as strong at that. Like, should I apply? Should I not? Thank God I did. Absolutely. What was I thinking? But I think having that stat out there, that was really interesting, and I hope that a lot of women see that, and actually, next time you do see a job spec, pick the 6 and actually go for it. Because again, what is the worst that could happen?
Why do you think that is? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's down to that kind of being humble, kind of not being able to brag about your accomplishments. And I think that's really ingrained in your brain. And I think I don't want to use confidence, because I don't, like, I'm pretty confident in my ability, but I'd definitely be one of those women who would want to get 10 out of 10. I think it's perfectionism. I think there's more pressure on women to be perfect in roles than there is in men, or women feel that way anyway, that you've got to be perfect. So from the very get-go of seeing that job spec, you're like, well, I have to be perfect. Whereas I think men feel like, I'm being very general here, but men feel like they can kind of, potentially wing it a bit more, or just have that confidence to be like, yeah, I'll learn on the job. Like,
I've heard of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's an irony to that. I think that like women have a tendency to feel that they need to be 100% prepared, yet feel like they aren't. Yeah. And go into the roles. Something odd about that. Definitely, yeah.
There's a really great book, which I'm reading at the moment. And it's, let me find the title of it. I've written it down in here. Just started it recently. I'll have to mention it to you at the end. But yeah, it's a book written by a man and woman. It's all about female leadership. And it's quite interesting because he wrote a book originally, which is all about kind of leadership, but it was very focused at men. And I think kind of 80% of his clients were men. And some of the quotes in the book are really funny when he tries to call out some of the male behaviors, which actually aren't getting them kind of to that next step up in their career. They're very defensive, and they're like, but I earn like monster, I earn like $5 million a year, so I must be doing right. And actually, if you're praising women and they get good feedback or doing quite well, they'll still focus on the negatives. So, and I've done that in the past, like when we get manager feedback and, you know, I'll get some lovely feedback, but if there's one thing which isn't even negative, it'll be the one thing that's just, you know, something I could improve on. I'll be like, oh my God, booking a meeting in right now. Whereas I wonder if a man had seen that it in the same way, who knows?
Yeah. I wonder. I've got a friend who he's a man. He should be applying for the next level role, but he isn't, and he keeps passing up the opportunity. And I keep asking him to apply. Like, why are you not applying? And he says he's terrified of what's that syndrome where you rise to the level of your own incompetency. Have you heard of that?
Oh, one? Right, yeah.
He says he's terrified. I can't remember what it's called. Yeah, he knows what it's called. Funny enough, and he's terrified of it. And I'm just like, just give it a go. Like, what is the worst that could happen? And if you get it, you probably deserve it. And you can only learn if you are there learning. Mm-hmm. You know, how if you can tick all of the criteria before you've even had experience in that role, I don't know. I think that's a marvel, really.
Yeah.
What other topics come up in the group that you think are kind of very relevant at the moment?
I think we're always talking about gender equality, and that's kind of like the general theme. But I think one of the things that we keep coming back to is the role that men play within our group, and we're struggling to figure out how that actually works at the moment. Core group will always be. We don't have any at the moment because it's a fairly new group. But what we'd like to do is have core group of women, and then they're called allies, basically male allies, because we don't want it to just, it's not a female problem. It's not a women just, It's not a problem just for women. And there's lots of men who'd like to help, but feel a bit awkward about getting in touch, or, you know, or even just think like, can I join the Women at Innocent group? You know, and that's why we're going to change the name, because we want it to be completely inclusive. So I think we have some really interesting conversations about that, about kind of the role that men will play in our group, and across the wider business as well. And then a lot of the chat as well is usually me talking about what I found on Instagram and just sharing a couple of posts, and it could be something that's about language to do with women. So if it's something to do with the word bossy, or, you know, aggressive instead of using the word assertive, then we'll have a chat about that and discuss the language. And it's really interesting because we've got other members across Europe. So it's really interesting talking to the French team about, you know, the French language, and, you know, the kind of masculine and feminine sides of that. And then sometimes I'll share stuff which just is, I've seen, and I'm like, God, that's so annoying. Like there was an ad recently, I don't know if you saw it, from the UK government about staying home. And it was basically, I'll send it to you. It's like an illustration of as if you can see into people's homes. And there's a woman stood there in front of an iron board carrying her baby. Yeah. And I was like, honest to God. And the man sat on the sofa. I was like, how the hell did this get through? What is going on? And it really frustrated me, because that's annoying, the fact that they've just got that so unbelievably wrong. But also it was just a really terrible concept. It didn't make me want to stay home. I don't want to stay at home and do the ironing. Like make a positive of it. There's loads of good stuff about staying at home, like having a bath, or I don't know, reading a book. Like focus on the positives. Don't get the ironing board out. No one's doing that. Like completely clueless. Just the worst bit of communication I've ever seen in my life. Hilarious.
Yeah, there still are lots of those hanging around. Like even the default avatar is a man or a woman, but it's a man. You still see that everywhere.
Definitely. We talked recently as well in the group about kind of Alexa and Siri as well, and, you know, why is it that female voices are used, and you know, shared a few articles around that, kind of the science behind it. So it's really broad. Like we'll talk about kind of anything and everything, and it could even be, you know, your experience that you've recently had at the gym. Like it's some of the stuff's really personal. But that's what I like about it, is that you can have these really big open like conversations about massive things, or it could be about something very, very personal that just happened like literally yesterday, and you just might need to get it off your chest. So I think that's great.
That is great. It'd be really interesting to see what happens when you bring men into the mix. Because I imagine it would be interesting, of course, to hear the different perspectives, but I think it would be enlightening for a lot of people. And if you can find a way to communicate about it openly and have that space so safe that men can also speak about it and reveal their naiveties in these areas, I think that's when be a good bit of progress being made.
Definitely.
Is there anything that you do within your own team to work with some of these practices and improve things?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of female designers in the team, and it can be really simple things like making sure you're championing them at a higher level. So making sure that their names are heard in senior meetings to say, they worked on this and it was brilliant. Or really simple things outside of work where you literally, if they've done some design work, you share it on Instagram. Like everyone's got a voice at the moment. Yeah. And everyone's spending a hell of a lot of time on social media. And I think there's so much nonsense shared that actually it's a really simple, easy thing to do, just to share some work of someone else's. So I try to do that as much as I can. And I think as well, we've got a mentoring scheme at Innocent as well, which I mentor someone across the business, which has been brilliant. And I've never done that before. And I've really, really enjoyed that. And it's been hard, actually. It's quite hard to, I think people think sometimes when you've got to a position of leadership, there was some sort of plan in place. And I did always know kind of wanted to be a creative director, but I didn't know how the hell I was going to do it. Yeah. And I think it's quite hard when people ask you like, right, okay, like what are the steps I need to take, or what do I need to do here? And you're like, actually, do you know what? It's completely individual, and it depends on your personality and what role you want to do and what your skill set is. And but that's been really interesting for me to kind of take a step back and have a think about that. And actually analyze some of the stuff that I've done where I'm like, all right, actually, what would have worked better? What could I have done faster? Or what slowed me down? It's interesting looking back.
Yeah. Okay. Have you done anything that you're particularly proud of that like had a good impact in this area within your own business, other than running the group, of course?
Definitely running the group. Definitely proud of that. I think trying to think of a specific. I think actually, do you know what? I had feedback from someone in my team just before Christmas last year to say, I think it's great that you've set up this group, and it's made me realize that even though I'm scared to do something, I should really just try and do it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, do you know what? Having that one person, I was like, God, like I think I've mentioned before, I'm not asked about awards or anything, not particularly bothered about that. It's actually having people who you respect and admire, having that one person say, that's actually inspired me to go off and do something similar. I was like, oh, I'm really super happy about that. And I've got a folder in my emails called nice emails. So if I'm having a bad day of imposter syndrome, I click on those emails and I'm like, it's okay. You're absolutely fine. Yeah. And I put that email straight in there because I was like, that makes everything kind of worthwhile. That's a really nice one. Yeah.
When you get those messages, you realize how unimportant a lot of the stuff you worry about is, and how some things that you feel are insignificant, you may just be role modeling something, but by doing that, you've opened the door. By setting an example, you've demonstrated that you can kind of get over the fear. And so many other people now will be thinking about what can I do in this area and how can I challenge myself? So I think that's really where the value is just pushing yourself beyond your limits and setting a good example, I think, and just challenging yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
It reminds me of, I was walking to work one day and my little brother texted me out of the blue, and he told me that he's just got into university, and he said, I don't think I would have applied if you'd never gone. And
amazing,
super memorable day. I was just so buzzing and pumped walking to work. And I think prior to that, I was just walking anxiously, worried about the day ahead. And then that for me was just success.
Yeah, great. Love stuff like that.
Yeah. So for people that are reflecting on how they can create a more inclusive and diverse workplace or install some practices within their own teams, do you have any tips for people?
Yeah, I think Innocent's great at, setting up different groups, like different affinity groups. And I think that's something fairly simple that anyone can do in their business. And I think if you've got someone kind of at a higher level to sponsor you, and if you go, whoever it might be, your manager, your boss, whoever, to say, look, I think there might be an issue here. Can we make a group and put something in place? And I think, don't be scared to do it, because I was, but it doesn't have to be this big, scary, like formal thing. It shouldn't be really. It should be kept really informal. Have a purpose, have a mission, decide on what you want to do. But go easy on yourself. But I think that's a really simple thing to do. A lot of companies as well have the stats on kind of gender pay gap or any of kind of inclusion and diversity stats. You can ask for those and see where the gaps are. And a lot of the time, people, particularly senior people, are very, very busy. So they're probably going to be like, great, can you actually help with this? Because we want to make a change. But sometimes it's too much for them. But I think it's a lot of the conversations are really difficult to have, whether you're talking about race or, gender equality or disability. But they're the conversations that are really important to have. And I think that's something that Innocent's been brilliant with. I think there's 4 or 5 affinity groups now, and anyone can join. It doesn't matter whether you kind of, for instance, for the female one, doesn't matter if you're male or female. We're going to encourage males to join, and just to have those open conversations, I just think will make such a massive difference, just normalizing some of the topics.
Yeah, I imagine it's quite daunting. Like, so you've brought all these people together, you realise that it could potentially have quite a bit of impact, and now you've got everyone here and you're going to discuss something important. It must be quite daunting being the person bringing all of that together.
It can be. I got recently told last week we had a meet up, and I was so busy with work. I actually sent an email out to the group to say, can someone else organise this session? Like, I'm absolutely swamped.
Yeah.
And someone said, like, oh, we're going to really miss your, what did she say? Like, your icebreaker at the start. And I was like, do I even do an icebreaker at the start? But it's basically this. It's just me, like chatting on or sharing an Instagram post or saying, like, did anyone see this illustration that Boris approved? Like, what the hell is this? So I think, you get the best out of people when things aren't scary. And I really try to be like that as a manager and a leader, whether I'm, in a women's affinity group or whether I'm doing interviews. It's really hard at the moment on video calls with interviews to try and make people feel comfortable. But, I try and do that with everything, because that's when you get the honesty and people are a bit more kind of chilled, you have a bit more of a laugh, and that's when you get the best out of people, really.
Yeah, 100%. So what are the steps as an organizer then to kicking off a group and kind of forming your first session?
I think I was in a lucky position in that someone said, does someone want to lead this? But if you haven't got that opportunity, I think it would be speaking to someone senior in the business to say, look, I would like to set up a gender equality group or whatever it might be. Is there a place for it? And be very clear on the reasons why you want to do it. And I think that's the first part. Hopefully they'll say yes. And then it's a case, for me, it was just basically sending out an email to say, look, this exists. Okay. Does anyone want to join? And keeping things quite open as well. People were quite nervous to join. I had a few emails where people are a bit like, I kind of want to join, but I don't know if I've got the time to, and I don't know if I know enough about the subject. I was like, hey, me neither. Do you know what? But that's the point, because you'll know things that I don't, and vice versa. So we'll learn from each other. So, and then, it basically goes from there, and then, kind of make it your own, I guess.
Okay, great. I think that'd be helpful for a lot of people. I'm wondering, so what experience have you had with what Jessica Walsh is up to?
Yeah, so she set up Ladies Wine Design quite a long time ago now. I think it's across 280 cities. So,
wow. Okay.
My first experience of it was in Newcastle, and there was a group of, I think there's a really small group of like 8 women. Basically, you could sign up to an email and you get an alert of an event in there once a month, and you get together and they used to, you know, have a glass of wine and cheese board. It was great. And there would be portfolio reviews or topics for discussion. You'd go along for a couple of hours and just sit with some like-minded women, basically. And I recently went to one of the ones in London, and I've actually hosted one with my sister in Newcastle I think it was in November, all about pitching. Because I used to do a lot of pitching, and my sister's company, she has to do a lot of pitching as well. But I just think, I mean, the numbers are so low for creative directors who are female, but also business owners within the creative industry. It's less than 1%, which is just absolutely insane. And I still can't actually get my head around the fact that it's less than 3% creative directors. I find that absolutely staggering. And Ladies Wine and Design is basically trying to challenge that imbalance and give women confidence and, you know, help with mentoring and sharing skills, sharing knowledge. And I absolutely love it. I think it's so valuable. They're great to follow on Instagram. It's across 280 cities. So wherever you are, you're pretty much, you know, you're going to be close to one. And at the moment as well, with it being virtual, you can go along to other kind of some of the other cities events if they've got space. That's the only problem, is that it sells out within about 5 minutes usually, which is really frustrating. But they always have brilliant speakers. Like that's where I got to see Stephanie Williams talk, and that was just so brilliant to hear her speak. But yeah, I just think it's such a great thing that started, and so inclusive, and super inspiring. I love it.
I think it's great that she's using her platform for something so good like that. It's amazing.
Definitely. Yeah.
And like she's leading by example and opening doors for many other people, which is, I think, like a key theme here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brave.
Yeah.
Could you just we'll wrap up shortly, but would you mind telling us about like the agenda and the themes for your pitching event that you ran?
Yeah. Oh God. You've caught me off guard here. Hold on. I'm gonna open up the file to remind myself what it was. So yeah, me and my sister ran it. It was, do you know what a lot of it was about being brave enough to ask questions from the get-go. Like in the last agency I worked, we had to do loads of free pitching. And you always felt like you were on the back foot. It was really, really frustrating. You could never get that kind of peer level relationship. And you'd get sent a brief and it would be super, super vague. And so you'd ring the client or you'd email them to say, can you clarify this? And quite a lot of the time you might get people, you know, sometimes people would give you a ring back or whatever, but it was kind of just like, crack on, go and do this free work for a week. And then we'll decide who we think's best. And it's like, how is that a process? Like that is just not how anyone gets the best work, is it? It's just crazy. So I think one of the big things we talked about was, you know, making sure that you're really challenging the brief from the get-go. Does it actually need to be a pitch? You know, are you actually the best agency for the job? What's the budget? That's such a simple question to answer, but I think people feel really awkward talking about money. But I've done so many pitches where they're like, oh, we haven't got a budget. It's like, well, you must have a budget. Like you either know it's going to be like 10 quid or 10 million pounds. So I think just to say, you know, well, you know, I've worked on projects like this in the past and it's cost 40 grand or whatever it is. Does that sound reasonable? And you'll be able to tell, particularly if you're face to face, they'll be like, or like, yeah, do you know what, that sounds fine. But having the confidence to ask those questions, I think is a massive one. And then not over delivering. I think a lot of agencies have got into the habit of, you know, they'll get the brief and they'll be like, right, okay, they've asked for 3 bits of packaging, let's give them 5 or an extra bit of POS or whatever it might be. And actually that's not that's unhelpful for everyone involved. Like for competitor agencies, it's not helpful for them because it just means everyone's going to be doing loads of work. And it's not good for the client either, because you're not then focusing on quality, you're focusing on quantity, and you're not going to win a pitch from just doing loads of work. And if that's the starting point, then what are they going to expect through the whole, once you've won the pitch and you've got the project, they're going to expect you to over deliver on everything. Absolute nightmare. So yeah, I don't really miss pitching that much at all, I must admit. I'm quite pleased that I did a lot of it. I did years and years of it. And, you know, it's a great feeling when you win. But the worst feeling when you don't win and you've got to tell your team, absolutely hated doing that. Just awful. But learned a lot. And hopefully from that session, me and my sister did, you know, people got some thoughts to take away, and it'll help them.
I imagine it's quite high pressure constantly if you're just pitching all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think as well, one of the things is like making it, you know, do you actually want to win the job? You know, do you actually want to work with a client? Is the money worth it? Are you actually going to be up all night for like the next 6 months trying to do this, whatever, style guide or packaging or something? Like, is it worth it in the end? But I always enjoyed pitching, the process of presenting work and trying to get a client on board and kind of, as cheesy as it sounds, like take them on the journey. I always really enjoyed that. But it was so much down to the actual client you were dealing with and how well you got on with them. That's such a massive part of it. And I've had some shocking things said to me in pitches. Like someone asked me halfway through a pitch how old I was. It's like, what on earth has that got to do with anything? But I was really caught off guard and I answered, and I really wish I hadn't. And one of the best bits of advice I've ever been given is from an old business advisor who said, if anyone asks me anything like that again, reply with, that's an interesting question. Why do you ask? And I'm like, oh my God, that is such a good thing to say. I love it. Yeah, I use it all the time. Literally. I use it with my parents. It's like, it's good, isn't it? It's really chucks it back to them.
Because it's also kind of like, under the veil of, in order for me to accurately answer your question, could you elaborate? And you're just giving them more rope.
Yeah, totally. I always wonder what he would have said as well. He would have been like, because you're young, so I'm assuming you're inexperienced. That's basically why he was asking how old I was.
It might have been it could have been a compliment. It might have been you.
I mean, maybe
younger than your years, or
Yeah, definitely didn't seem that way.
No. I spoke to somebody before in one of these interviews, Yuri Suzuki, and he's a partner at Pentagram. He's a sound artist, and he was speaking about his first stage of the process is always just figuring out wherever or not he gets on with the client. And if he doesn't get on with the client, then he won't take the job. And if he isn't interested in the job, then he just won't take it any further than that, because he won't do his best work. And if he's not doing his best work, then he doesn't get more work off the back of it. And you end up building a precedent for yourself that is ultimately detrimental long term.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great tip.
Absolutely, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for chatting to me today. I think there's quite a lot in there for people that can go away and apply themselves. And like I said, it's a really important conversation for me to have, because it's not something that I've thought much about, but I definitely will from now on as well.
Yeah, it's good. I'll send you links to those books as well that I'd forgotten the name of.